Dream bigger. That's the most important thing for young people because you've got time to dream. So whether you've had a couple of rough years or whatnot, didn't go to college, didn't go to school, didn't do whatever, go ahead and make that dream come true because it's in the back of your mind. It's just that you're scared to do it.
Do you ever wonder how the music that you hear on the radio is put together? Oh, well, today I am so excited to interview one of the premier program directors, Mr. BK Kirkland. I grew up with BK. I worked with him at WBLS, and he is dropping so many gems for us today because he was a program director of WBLS, of BLX in San Francisco. And for 20 some years, he was the program director at Sirius for Soul Groove, which I love listening to. So you are listening to Lydia Nicole, and this is Acting Smarter Now. How was it when you first came to WBLS, and what year was it?
Well, I first came to WBLS when they were located on 2nd Avenue, 801 2nd Avenue, in 1976. I met Wanda Ramos at a Quincy Jones after concert affair. So that was a lot of fun. And somebody introduced me to Wanda. And I asked her, I said, is Frankie looking for anybody? And she said, coincidentally, yes, Frankie's looking for people. So she said, get me a tape and I'll pass it on to him. So I got back to Philly on Monday, sent the tape on Monday. And I think on Friday, that following Friday, I actually heard from Wanda saying that Frankie wants to meet you. He liked your tape. He'd like to meet you. And we set up a date for an interview.
And so once you set up the date, how soon did you come to the station?
Right away.
I love it.
Right away. Working on BLS was such, a big goal for every Black DJ or Latino DJ or white DJ, whatever. BLS was so notorious and great talent as well. So when I got the opportunity to say I want to interview with Frankie and when's he available, he was available the next Friday. So I talked to her on Friday and we set it up for Monday.
Which is funny because he took a lot of Fridays off. So you had God on your side. He took a lot of Fridays off, especially in the summertime. He was gone. So when you came in, how did you acclimate to the station and to, because I'm assuming it was very different from what you had been used to.
This was major leagues. This was like going from, a farm team in Philadelphia up to the major leagues. It's like in Black radio, you're playing for the Yankees now. So there's no playing around. This is for real. This is an opportunity of a lifetime. And my frame of mind is totally focused on don't screw this up.
So now you're at the station. Did you come in with a slot or were you filling in for a period of time?
Well, there was some movement because Frankie was in court on his payola charge. And so that left a Sunday evening slot 4 till 8 because Carlos de Jesus, late Carlos de Jesus, was working that slot. And because some movement was happening during the day and whatnot, JD Holiday got bumped up and things like that. That left that noon till 4 slot. So Carlos took that slot and he trained me. I showed up an hour early, sat with Carlos, and he, showed me the routine of carts and things like that. And so he trained me for the 4 to 8. And I did one show. Frankie heard the show, and I didn't take any chances. I mean, I just did basic radio. But I wanted to make sure it was mistake-free. It was perfect because that's what you've got to be in New York. You don't have time to make mistakes or underperform. So I just made sure it was a good, clean show. So Frankie heard the show. Um, and the thing that happened, Lydia, was that Frankie didn't show up for the interview. Hal actually hired me.
Hal
I sat in,
Jackson.
Hal Jackson hired me. I sat in the lobby for a number of hours that day. Eventually, Wanda came out and she said, Frankie's not going to show. He's meeting with his lawyers. He doesn't have the time. Can we reschedule? So I said, yeah, we can reschedule. But it was like 4 hours for me to wait around for the next bus and everything back to Philly. So I wasn't high on sitting in Port Authority for 4 hours. So I just sat there in the lobby because if you know anything about radio station lobbies, some very interesting people show up. So I just sat there and Hal Jackson walked by me a couple of times. And eventually, after like the second hour, Hal said, "Who are you waiting for?" So I told him I'm waiting to see Frankie. And I reminded Hal that I interviewed him for a college paper. And he remembered because he was working at WNJR then. But anyway, he remembered and he says, "Come on in the office." And we talked for a while. I played the tape for Hal. And he said to me, he says, "Okay, so Frankie's not here." He says, "I'm going to hire you." That surprised me a little bit. Like, you could do that. So he said, "Yeah." He said, you're going to work next Sunday." So he's the one who set that up. Frankie heard the one show that I did. He said his critique was he wished I would have talked a little bit more because, like I said, I want to be perfect on this. I don't want any mistakes, any foolish mistakes or anything like that. But he wasn't. He didn't have an objection to me, actually joining the team as much as Hal hired me by then. But it set off that large turf war between Hal and Frankie. I was in the middle of it, and I wasn't in the middle of it. I've told a lot of people this very easily before, very conscious of what I was saying, that Hal hired me. I'm on Hal's team, you know. And there were times when Frankie actually, would put me in the middle and whatnot. And I let Frankie know I'm on Hal's team, So that's the way that went down. But that's the way I got hired and I got on the air at BLS.
And you were on-air personality up until Wanda left?
Not specifically that. After Wanda left, Hal was the PD. He filled in as PD, right?
Yes.
And you were in the library. You were the
Yes.
one who was doing the scheduling of the music and the shows and whatnot. And I was there a little while Wanda was still there as well. So you guys were the first transition, but you guys were after Frankie was let go.
We were with Frankie, and then we were after Frankie. So
You were.
Yeah, we were part of the second original crew, so to speak, because it was G. Keith Alexander was Frankie's original music director. Then G. Keith got bumped up and he started being on-air personality, and he was doing his voiceover work and got so busy he left. And then Wanda came in, and I came in shortly after because I wandered in off the street a little bit like you did. I stayed there for hours waiting for Frankie. So my story is I went down to meet Frankie Crocker because I would hear him on the radio. I thought he was my friend. I thought he was talking directly to me. And I wanted to go to Hollywood to act. And I wrote a little script. So I took it to Frankie. I got there at noon and waited in the lobby till about 3-ish. And the guy said, you have better luck if you go wait by the parking lot with Curly's parking lot. Said, okay. So I went to the parking lot. I was waiting. And then Curly about 5 to 4 sent me to go get him a soda across the street at the deli. So I obliged because he was kind enough to let me stay there. And I go and get the soda. I come back and he says, "Oh, you just missed him. He had to leave." I was like, "What?" And then I calmed down. I came back the next day. And that was a blessing because when I came back the next day, he was waiting for me. Frankie was waiting for me. And that's how I ended up at BLS.
Yeah,
I was
there you go.
13 years old. I didn't have a clue, but I made myself at home. So I understand
Yeah,
the waiting in the lobby.
yeah, it's important. It's
Yes, it
important.
is. So when Hal was the PD, tell me the transition, because then you started getting into the music at that point.
Well, once it was announced that Frankie was no longer with the company, there was an early morning meeting with Hal, Peppy Sutton, Dorothy Brunson. They had called my mother's house and left a message that they wanted to see me at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I went to the meeting, and I thought I was going to be fired. I said, why else do you want to see me at 9 o'clock in the morning? And I just started, So when I got there, it was Dorothy who spoke. And she said, Mr. Kirkland, because everything was Mr. and Mrs. with her. Mr. Kirkland, we're taking a gamble on you. So I'm saying, okay, I'm trying to figure out where's this conversation going. And she said, we've got some fine people on staff and whatnot, and we don't place anybody higher than we place anybody else. But Frankie's not coming back, and we're choosing you to do the afternoon show. And how would you feel about that? So I said, how would I feel about that? Yes. So that's how I got that position. But because I was doing 4 to 8, the studios were right off of Frankie's office, which Hal was occupying at the time. And I just felt free running back and forth to Hal saying, Hal, can we change this up? Would you let me play this record? Can I play this record? I think this record's a good record. And Hal followed a lot of my advice on that. And, eventually a couple of months later, Hal says, I can't make you the music director. That's the position I had in Philadelphia, was a position of influence. And it's the first level of influence beyond being a programmer. So Philadelphia enticed me because at least I knew in Philly, if I wanted to stay there, I probably could, because next move for me would be to move up to PD. And so Hal said, I can't make you music director. He knew that I wanted to, eventually get up to PD and whatnot. And he said, but I'll let you come into my music meeting. I want you to come in, every week. We'll sit down with the records and whatnot, and, give me your advice on what you think about stuff. So he allowed me to do that. He also allowed me to give him critiques. Lydia, we had the worst studios. And we had a nice environment, great building and everything, but the studios were terrible because we had Sparta, which is a brand of, broadcast equipment, turntables, microphones, the board, all of it was cheap stuff. Even the AM stations I had worked at had better equipment than this. And one day I was listening to a song at high volume in the control room, and the turntables are run by a little ball. And it was off. I could hear it rumbling inside the song. So I'm saying, that's interesting. Is it just me, or am I hearing that? So I had one of these little radio recorders, the first radio recorders in a small box, not the big box, a small box. And I turned it on and recorded some of the show. And when I was on my way home listening in my car, because I had a cassette in the car, I'm listening and I could hear the rumble. So I went to Hal. I said, Hal, we got a terrible situation here. That equipment in there is terrible. There's a rumble in the turntables. And so he came into the control room and he listened. And Hal didn't have good hearing, but
no, he did not.
it was kind of funny when I pointed it out to him. And I said, oh God, he's got hearing aids. So he said, okay, so these turntables got to go. He called him Bob
Schuster.
The head engineer. He called him Bob Schuster. He gave him hell. He said, get that stuff out of here. He said, what else, BK? What else would you change it? I said, man, this board's got to go. This is all. We had rotaries when we should be using slides and stuff like that. It's just easier to run. And and whatnot. And I said, the microphone's terrible. So we swapped in about 2 or 3 weeks, we swapped out everything in the studio. I said, wow, now we're there. So a lot of the advice I gave Hal for not just myself, but for the other people too. I'm surprised that none of the other DJs heard it, this rumble, but I did. And I pointed it out to Hal. And so Hal started trusting me with, that's the operation side and things like that. I gave him suggestions on carding
For the commercials?
For the commercials, yeah, because we had some issues with stuff not firing and things like that. And those were tape players.
And when you say firing, it wasn't playing. When you hit the thing, it wasn't working. Yeah. Okay. Just for the people who don't know.
So Hal trusted me on a lot of operational things besides the music. And so that's how I got my first entree really into, management. Hal
was trusting you with a lot of information, because that's not, most people don't get that. They don't get that inner, they don't get to be in that inner circle where you can talk and that the person listens. So I think we have to be very clear on, you got Hal's ear when a lot of people did not. Yes. So, because everybody wants to give their point of view, everybody wants to give their take on, and I think you should do this. And okay. So Hal was doing the programming at that point. Inner City bought a station in Detroit and Berkeley. How long before you started going to the other stations to help with the programming?
Not long. I was doing 4 till 8. One day, Hal came in and said, we got a new station in Detroit. Janie Washington and Janice Campbell went out to program that, and they were having issues from the beginning. Hal knew I had some experience in Detroit. Before I came back to Philadelphia, I actually worked in Detroit for almost a year. So Hal knew that. So he says, Detroit? I said, yeah, I know Detroit. So he said, I want you to come with me next week. We're going to go out to Detroit a couple of days. I want you to listen to the programming, listen to the jocks and whatnot. Let me know what you think. So I just figured Hal was going to park me in the hotel and just let me hang out and listen to the radio, So he calls me like at 7 o'clock in the morning. He says, are you dressed? Are you ready? I said, you want me to listen to the radio, right? So he said, no, because you're coming to the station with me. So I jumped up, put my suit on and whatnot, and went into the station with him, which was nice. He had a quick meeting with the jocks, Janie and Janice, and let everybody know who I was. But everybody's kind of familiar with me because they're familiar with what BLS does, we're trying to do. I got a nice, respectful welcoming because that's important. If these people don't trust that you can do the job, how do you expect them to do the job? I've always been very comfortable inside of my career in working with people and having people on my staff to understand the point is I ask you to play this commercial or read this commercial or do this way because that's what I have to do as well. So I'm not just, telling you the Frankie Crocker story, which is, Frankie did it his way. For everybody else, you had to do it his way.
For a long period of time, the personalities, male, that came in all had to sound similar to Frankie.
Yes.
There was it was, from Sergio, that everybody who got hired had the same timbre as he did. So if you weren't listening closely, you didn't know it wasn't Frankie. Every now and then you would catch somebody say, oh, that's not Frankie. That's Sergio, or that's BK, or that's who, probably the person who had the most distinct voice was Von Harper, as far as he had such a low baritone voice that there was no way he was going to sound like Frankie.
Yep. He had the AM delivery, and that was, different. That was a big thing for being a key member at BLS. And the nice thing was that I never had to do the Frankie Crocker show. Ricky Ricardo, Sergio, Ronnie Magnum, Van Jay. There's a long line of guys who had done it. G. Keith Alexander did that show. And I pride myself in that just from the standpoint of one thing. A lot of people never get out of that phase where it's just easier to imitate Frankie than to be themselves. My father always told me, and most of the things I had done throughout my life or was trying to do in working with people and whatnot, he always used to say, don't try to be them, be yourself, and how important that was. I may not have sounded like myself to the average listener or something like that, but to myself, I'm revealing little pieces about my life, who I am and whatnot. And that's what the other jocks didn't interject inside of their shows. They didn't interject who they were, where they were from, what they liked, what's your favorite spaghetti.
Mm-hmm.
Frankie did that,
Yeah.
talked about his favorite thing.
And Ken Webb did that. Ken Webb had the permission to do that in the morning. Because he had to keep everybody moving. But I would say Kenny was the only jock who could really get away with whatever he wanted to say in the morning. But everybody else had to kind of follow Frankie's mandate. So you go to Detroit. What was the outcome in Detroit when you went with Hal?
Well, I learned that the biggest problem was the station wasn't actually in Detroit. It was in a town called Mount Clemens, north of Detroit, by about 30 minutes. So we didn't reach Detroit Metro. There were 4 or 5 other stations. It was the original, what we used to call Chocolate City. You had DRQ, you had CHB AM and FM, and 2 others. Gosh, I can't tell you what they are now, but this was the most crowded market for radio, black radio in the country. There were 4 or 5 competitors, including LBS. And in my estimation, the signal was a big deterrent that what we were doing in New York is not going to work in Detroit musically. These guys are going to have to be a little more multicultural than we are, because it just stands to reason that you're going to have to reach, different kinds of listeners and put together a different kind of coalition that we put together in New York. And that was the big stumbling block there.
BLS rose up to prominence right after the civil rights movement. I mean, it was not really that long. We're talking 65. BLS was came on the scene 72, 73. So it wasn't even 10 years, the shift. Because now you're in New York, you also grew up in New Jersey. So you got to see stuff shifting. I'm assuming you got to see that there was a shift after the civil rights. Martin Luther King was assassinated. You had all this. Malcolm X was assassinated. Now we have two Black-owned stations in New York City. Not only do we have 2 Black-owned stations, but one has now become the station of New York City. You can't go anywhere without hearing WBLS. It didn't matter who you were. In the mid-70s, BLS was everywhere because the sound was different. Do you have anything to contribute to talking about, because this is huge. We don't really hear this a lot, people talking about how this affected community. I mean, this was not far after the civil rights.
Let's talk about the AMs. Excuse me. The AMs. You had WNJR in Jersey, where Hal was in the late 60s. You had WLIB in Harlem, and you had WWRL in Queens. And they all did well in terms of they all spoke up, especially like in '64 before BLS. The premier personalities then was Enoch Hawthorne Gregory on RL, Rocky G on RL. Other prominent people happened to be Hal, who was on NJR. WLIB had Eddie OJ, and they had Jack Walker, the pear-shaped talker, and they were the original foundation for Black commentary radio. And RL, NJR, LIB, all of them had public service shows too. When 72 bumps around 73, WBLS's secret weapon, in my estimation, was a guy named Kurt Clemens. Kurt was there with the microphone flag, WBLS, and he's sticking the microphone in everybody's face. Right? At every demonstration, every march, he was there. David Lampell, outspoken critic of, the system in America and whatnot, fighting every day for people. And David was on every day. Wayne Gilman was on every day. We had a news presence, and we kept that news presence all the way up, Lydia, probably until 78, 79, when we started to cut back on the amount of news and just feed them music. And
we had Hank Williams was doing news. We're missing one other person that I can't think of, but it feels to me like we have one more person.
Mark Riley.
Thank you.
Mark Riley.
Can't forget Mark.
We had a full-fledged news staff. And then we were active politically because Percy Sutton was running for Manhattan Borough president. And we were deeply involved in those races in the early 70s. We were involved with Jesse Jackson and his campaign in the early 70s because we're the big loudspeaker now. So we took on the national stories. Mark O'Dwyer was the Manhattan Borough president before Percy. Mark was on the board of WBLS, so that made sense for Percy to pay him off out front with that so that Mark would support Percy. So we were, very visible inside of all of the congressional races, presidential races, and things like that in the New York City area.
Yeah, because I just, we're in that climate again where we got to start fighting. And so just to talk about how, even though things changed, they're trying to roll it back. And so just to give context to that. So, all right. So you went to Detroit, you gave your input as to what was needed in the programming and the fact that they didn't have much wattage. For some reason, inner city used to like to buy stations that had no wattage. You got 5 wattage and it goes off at 6 p.m. So make it good. Make it count. Yeah. So when did you go to KBLX? Because that's when you really took off. It was like you now were not in the shadow of anybody. Now you got to be you completely.
Yeah. Well, I turned down the opportunity. I think that Hal got wind that Frankie's coming back. And I was out on the road at this point. I'm out here with Hal for Detroit, definitely. So when I got back to New York, Pepe Sutton asked me, if I would take over the responsibility of WLBS work in Detroit. And I told him, no, I've been to Detroit. I'm not going back. And so one night outside of the Copa, I was working at KTU after I turned down the LBS job, and came back to work at Disco 92.
Oh, wait. We gotta go back. Something happened. Something big happened. So you left BLS and went to KTU?
Yeah, Frankie came back and he put me on overnights.
Oh, okay.
Well,
That's
I'm looking around.
That's when he came in with the white horse and Studio 54. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
We're good now. Go ahead.
So he came back, put me on overnights. JD Holiday left BLS because Frankie wanted his spot back, and JD was doing the Frankie Crocker show for that, period of time that Frankie was out on trial. And so I was working at KTU, which is right around the corner from the Copacabana. And Pepe Sutton was there for an affair. And he asked me, he says, BK, he says, we really need you in Detroit. And I said, I'm not going back to Detroit, And I knew that was a no-win situation. That was one of the stations that just couldn't be.
Because they had no wattage.
Yeah, they didn't have the signal. And they didn't really have a staff, too. It would have been a lot of work, Lydia. They were in the basement of a building that flooded. And that was another problem, too. It's like, who wants to work in boots every day?
Who thought it was a good idea to buy that station?
I don't know.
Who did that?
Oh, probably Pierre. So Pepe said to me, okay, since you won't go to Detroit, he said, I'm having issues in San Francisco too. And so Hal was out in San Francisco. I took a quick trip out there while Hal was there one day, because this was Hal's next move. I was Hal's guy. I mean, his right-hand man. So he sent me out, hung out a couple of days.
And you're still at KTU? Are you still at KTU?
No. I left KTU because they changed the format to K-Rock.
Oh, okay.
With Howard Stern.
Oh, okay.
They asked me to stay. I could have done rock radio in Detroit. But I said, how long is a black guy going to last doing rock radio in Detroit? They already have Roscoe. So I took the shot at San Francisco because they had a better situation with regards to signal. They seemed to have a halfway decent staff. And they had a population that was really, very close to New York. It was 30% Latino. It was 16 or 17% Black. But it had a dimension of about 15 to 16% Asian and the rest white. So it gave me an opportunity once they decided they wanted to have something like a Quiet Storm out there. I said, all I have to do is find songs from the Latino community that present their flavor, R&B that presents the flavor, and get this ballad thing together, this soft and warm sound together. And we did, and it did really, really well. When I took it over, it was number 17. In the first 12 months, we went from 17 to number 10. In 82, we moved from number 10 to number 7, and we moved to number 1 in 3 key categories: females 25-54, females 35 to 64, and 18 to 34. And that had never been done before. We actually were in control of the black money in the San Francisco market in 2 years. I mean, the station was in the red when I took over, but we were making a lot of money. We actually were paying off some of BLS's bills at the time. So we did really well.
So you came in and you started the Quiet Storm, but with your twist to it.
Yes.
Because the original Quiet Storm started at HUR.
Yes.
So tell me how the decision of the programming started when you got at BLX.
Well, I met with Percy Sutton before I went out, and they made the final decision. Percy made that decision that I could go. He said, I want a Quiet Storm kind of station. He says, I don't care what you play, just call it the Quiet Storm. So I said, just fumbled around with it and whatnot. But we did the progressive side as important. We played a lot of Benson, a lot of Giroux. We played a lot of Gene Carn. We played a lot of Phyllis Hyman, and progressive black singers of that ilk. We did a lot of the Laws family, Deborah, Ronnie, Eloise, and it gained a lot of traction because San Francisco was known as a jazz market. There was a full-time jazz station. KORF KREFM, which became KBLX, was actually a contemporary jazz station. But there were too many jazz stations. I'm saying, I can't lean too heavy jazz because I'm competing against myself. I've got KBLX or KRE FM and KRE AM. So we own two jazz stations in the market. There's a full-time jazz station and there's a contemporary jazz station. So I'm saying, we have to cut down on beating ourselves. And that's what I did. I kept those elements in place to play some contemporary jazz, but only maybe 2 or 3 times an hour, as opposed to most of the hour being that way. And some great vocalists and whatnot. We played some pop material. We played Barbara Streisand and people like that. So we had the most eclectic mix of music on the radio.
And how long were you at KBLX?
All right. So I did KBLX until 1983, 84, because I had 1 year, 84. I came to LA, worked with you for a minute at Cute 102 and KGFJ. And on the heels of that, Frankie had taken off almost 3 consecutive years. He just wasn't working.
Right.
And so I got a sneaky call from Warfield.
Charles Warfield. Was he general manager at that time?
General manager then.
Okay.
And Warfield would send me books on BLS and whatnot. And I would always send back these little, exposés and whatnot of what I thought was wrong and what should be going on and whatnot. Because I was a college student, I did term papers 3 or 4 times a year. So I was used to writing papers, and that kind of thing came in very important for me to explain in detail what was wrong, what was missing. And it also, too, Lydia, put me on the spot that if I'm going to write it down, I'm going to fully evaluate and whatnot. Here's the solution. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I should be let go. But so for all of those papers that I had done for them in those 2 years, it wasn't hard. I mean, it was just stability in the time slots because so many different people were doing the Quiet Storm. There was nobody in a spot except for Ken Webb and Al Roberts. When I got the call one spring morning from Warfield saying, I want to talk to you confidentially. Don't say this to anybody, but we just let Frankie go. We're not making it public or anything like that. We want you back in New York, as soon as possible.
So, well, they're not just saying come back. What are they offering you? Because you weren't leaving somewhere where you were already doing well, not under anybody's thumb. So you make it seem like, oh, I'm gonna go. Let's talk. What happened?
You're right, Lydia.
Thank
you. Thank you for picking up on it. Very big decision for me. I was getting 4 paychecks in California. I was getting KBLX, KRE. I was getting KGFJ, and I was getting Cute 102. So I was living the life of a prince, traveling back and forth on jet planes every 2 or 3 days to LA, big dinners, contacts with the Hollywood community. So we had just had our first baby. So why would I want to disturb all of this, And I was working for Judge Sutton. Judge Sutton retired from the bench, New York State Supreme Court Justice, the first Black one. And he's the one who set up the deal for me in California. He said he made me the West Coast program director for the 4 stations and whatnot. He said, the judge also said to me, he says, my brother wants you still in Detroit, but we had a good laugh over that. He said, no, it's not going to happen, Judge. So when Warfield called me, he said, be here in 2 days. I took the trip in, called my mom and dad just a couple of hours before I landed because I didn't want them to be overhyped that I'm coming back. And I had that frank conversation with Hal before I had it even with Percy. And Hal was in LA. Hal knew that this was going on too, but I talked to Hal before I came back to New York. So he says, it's your decision to make, BK. But, if you're happy here, and you decide to stay, Hal was going to stay on the West Coast too. He was happy in LA. So I said, man, I like working for you so much. We work well as a team. So they got me there. You know what they did? They brought Hal back into New York and made him vice chairman. So I said,
which I was angry about, but that's another story. Go ahead.
Okay. But, we worked well as a team. And you were part of that team as well, in a number of different instances and places. It's funny how God always flocks good people together. But I talked to my wife, and that's the hardest conversation to have, because you don't want to move your kids around too much in this business.
And how old were the kids at that point?
Just born.
Oh, was this Portia?
Pamela.
Oh, Pamela. Okay. Pamela. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. She was born in 85. So she was,
okay.
Right in, Lori was in pregnancy when all of this was going on. And that wasn't good either, because she had already had a miscarriage. So, it was a tough decision. And my mom and dad wanted us back. They were of failing health. And, it was like 51-49. And I took it. And then Peppy Sutton tries to undercut me and give me the union minimum for the job. I'm saying I make 6 figures and then some in California. I'm not taking under $100,000 for this job. And one thing I always did, Lydia, was I kept a World Airways ticket in my pocket, because it was only $100 to go back home.
Amen. That was when that ticket didn't expire.
Yeah, it didn't expire.
That was back in the day when it didn't expire.
$100, you got a hot meal, pillows, blankets. So I had a ticket ready. It was always my standby. But I think that, after weighing my family, considerations the most, I did that. So I got there, talked with Warfield, talked with Percy, and, went back to the second floor. Warfield shows me, Frankie's office, Hal's office that I had been in. He says, you can have this office.
801 2nd Avenue. Yes.
Yeah, second floor. Well, Frankie had the good office, right?
Yes,
he had a studio in the office. He had a folding couch in the office. The plant collection, the whole thing. So it was really nice. But it didn't sway me to take the job. I took the job. It took me a couple of months to work out all of the politics and everything. Got into a fierce argument with David Lampel.
What was that about?
Politics. People wanted the office. People wanted control. David wanted to get more news back on the air, and we certainly weren't going. Once that horse has left the station, once that train's left the station, it's hard to put it back. And he wasn't happy with me giving him 2 or 3 minutes and then some public service programming on the weekend. He wanted to go back to 5 minutes and breaking news and all of that. And we can't do that.
So you came back into New York as the program director, as part of management. Now you have a power that you didn't have before. Now you're in charge. You're running the show.
You think you are, Lydia. Like you said earlier, I had the best situation in San Francisco and LA because there was nobody there to check me. There was no way for them to listen to what I was doing or be critical of it, okay? In New York, the chairman wanted to have more of an influence than, I really thought he would have.
Or should have.
Absolutely. He told me in our first meeting after I accepted the job and we got the salary correct that I was not going to be allowed to play rap. And this is the second time we're going through this, because in 1978, when Rapper's Delight came out, he mandated that we could not play that record. He also mandated in 1978 that we could not play Push Push in the Bush by Musique. These are the 2 biggest songs of the summer, and we were not allowed to play them. So it really hurt us in the ratings, and that set up Frankie's return in terms of everybody put it on our shoulders. Hal in mind that, that was our decision. No, it's not our decision. This is Chairman's decision. So when I went back in 84, you're figuring that these people have matured by this. Their minds know how important rap music is. And so that's the first thing that he told me. You're going to have to figure out how to do this without rap. Get back to number one, but get back to number one without rap.
And it's important to understand that rap was starting to take off. You now had radio stations in New York that were really featuring rap.
Yep.
So, but you're not able to play rap. I just want to make the distinction because
I'm not able to play it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the next situation is the logical one. I mean, I wanted to do the Quiet Storm in New York, and Vaughn had the perfect voice for it. So the chairman said, yeah, that's a good idea. I want to do that. He says, I want you to have a special intro for it, though. He said, I want you to have wind blowing. And I wanted to go on for like, 2 or 3 minutes just to set up the show. So we have this loud wind blow for like 2 or 3 minutes, right?
No understanding of radio.
Then he wanted Sarah Vaughan, Mr. Phillips, and folks like that playing it. I said, we can't do that, So I got problems with the wind, and I'm not comfortable playing these people as well. I can't play your playlist. So on the elevator back downstairs, I came up with the ideas. I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have the Sunday classics. And I'll play all of your music there on Sunday morning. It's a perfect position and whatnot. And we won't have to jeopardize the Quiet Storm with that.
Was that the 8 to 12?
8 to 12. So I go back up to the chairman and tell him, so we're going to do the Sunday morning classics. This is how it's going to roll, and you're going to be happy with it. So he says, good. I want Rocky G or Eddie OJ to be the host. So I get back on this elevator. I'm going downstairs, and I'm saying, what can I do? So I got off the elevator, and Hal was standing there. So I got off the elevator and said, Hal, you got a show. He looked at me like, what are you talking about? So I said, you're doing something we call the Sunday Classics. I said, you're perfect for the show. The chairman doesn't know about this. If you want to tell him, you can tell him. But it's your show. But he was so nervous, Lydia. The first Sunday we were in there were like 5 of us in the studio with him. So I could see Hal's a little nervous. So I said, okay, you, and you out. Get out. And we helped Hal get through the first show because he was nervous. Okay. So I said, it works with fewer people in here with you. So May help me put together the first, maybe the show for the first year. We picked out the music for him and everything like that. And we got him gradually involved where he could pick out his songs and things like that. So he'd have his input, and he gained his confidence, and people loved the show. May James was the music director for me then.
She had been Frankie's right-hand person, and now Frankie was gone, but May was still there.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
So it turned into that ongoing tennis match where we're just hitting the ball back into each other's court, because he always had something else going on where he had an idea that was just not going to work. It was just foolish, and it was not planned or anything like that. I got tired of suggestions in the hallway where people would just walk up to you and say, hey, I think you should do this, or I think you should do that. There's just a lot of noise going on at BLS. So I found my haven at the station was not to be in the office, was to be in the library. I put up a little makeshift desk in the back in the library and just worked out of there every day. But it had no telephone, which was great because I didn't have to field the everyday once an hour call from a record promoter. Or it also stopped people from dropping by. He's not in his office. He's not answering the phone, and those were good things to give me some clearance to be able just to think and maneuver my way around. But there were 3 or 4 early incidences that I had run-ins with the chairman on that were just, things that we should not be doing. And to God be the glory. He got me through that in terms of gave me some answers quickly. And luckily, I got through that period.
this is where the waters get muddy. You have a job description, you have a title, and now you have the owner or one of the owners that keeps meddling, for lack of a better word. They know nothing about programming. They may have the ownership, but they really don't know how things run, yet they want to put their signature on it. How do you handle it with grace and with God?
Yes. Well, here are my favorite advisor at the time was my dad. Parents have that feeling, that knowledge of their kids, knowing when something's wrong. And the big family Sunday dinners are now at my big house in Patterson and whatnot. And he always could tell something's off, something's wrong. So we'd eventually slip away from the ladies, because it was all ladies, and sit down and have a glass of champagne and talk. And here's one that really stuck with me, Lydia. My father told me, he says, you're at a company where it's a card game, and the bosses deal the cards every day. They're going to look at your cards before you see them, and they know the cards that are on the table. Now, son, you have two choices. You either play the hell out of the cards they dealt you, or you fold and you quit. And then my father capped and said, you're not a quitter. So he said, play the hell out of the cards that they're dealing you. And he was right about that, because he gave me another lesson on be yourself. Tell these people how you really feel, because all they'll do if you don't tell them is they'll exploit you more. So make some people mad, because you're mad at some people, So go ahead and fight and be yourself. And I did that from maybe 1985, 86. We had a great year, but it all stopped at 1986, Lydia, when we became number one, because we hadn't been number one since 1978. And truth be told, Frankie wasn't the PD when we went to number one. Hal was.
Yeah, but it was Wanda's programming. Hal was the name as PD, but Wanda and I were the ones doing the music at that time. Frankie had left, and
but we had that conversation. Frankie gets all of the credit, but and I'm saying too that Hal deserves some of that credit as well. But for the decision where the chairman made that we couldn't play rap in those two records, and the other thing, Lydia, was that Frankie came back from Meet Him. He had gone ahead and copied Cerrone's album. We were playing Frankie's version of Cerrone, Supernature, when KTU. So KTU's got now the three biggest songs. So it was no surprise to see BLS fall from maybe top 5 to number 17. Remarkable in terms of, how 30 days would have turned that around. How could have been named PD if we had reached that 30 days before that. So where did we leave off? Okay, 1986. We went to number one. We came back and beat Kiss FM. They were making the noise. We also were competing with the end of KTU at that time as well. So even with stiff competition, we actually went ahead and we started winning. And that was the culmination of the Quiet Storm doing well, Sunday Classics doing well, some of the other things we were doing, some mini mixes that we were doing well. We were innovative, and some things were happening for us. The wheels came off again when the chairman started making some other suggestions with regards to programming that were. I asked for a TV commercial. I don't know whether you ever saw these. Did you ever see the Michelangelos?
No.
So, 86, we took on too much. We picked up the Apollo. So, along with Charles Warfield, I had the responsibility of choosing acts for Showtime at the Apollo. All right. We had Apollo Theater Records. So automatically, some of the winners got recording contracts with Apollo Theater Records, and these people never should have gotten a recording contract. However, I was forced to play some of these songs that were absolutely garbage. Well, we were just spread so thin because there's only so much you could do. Being a program director in New York is a 24/7 job. And you add on top of it the responsibility of the Apollo. Oh, I had a radio show going on at the same time that became Showtime at the Apollo. So it was just too much, and it was just too much stress and pressure, and it started to really weigh down, the objectives and whatnot. What were we? We weren't. It wasn't about BLS anymore for a minute. It was about the Apollo.
So let's talk about working at a Black-owned company, because it brings special and unique challenges that I don't think are at white-owned companies, or at least that hasn't been. I've worked for two Black-owned companies, inner city, and then I worked at the Black Family Channel, which was a cable channel that was owned by Willie Gary and Holyfield, and a baseball player. And so what I have found, and I could be wrong, and please correct me, but what I have found is that we have good intentions. We want to do good, but we are not equipped to bring in the right people and allow them to do their job.
Yeah.
Because we are so desperate to be part of that programming team. We got to put, instead of going, okay, I'm the money person, that's my job. I bring you the money to set it up, and now you run it and bring me back my money. Bring me, give me. That's how it should be. What I can say about inner city was they had extraordinary talent, like you, like Wanda, that the only person that ever got their due was Frankie.
That's
the
all.
only person ever. Other than that, no one that came after Frankie ever got the credit. You didn't get the credit. Hal didn't get the credit. Wanda didn't get the credit. And then we can go on and on with the other program directors who came after you. But that the upper management was not equipped at all. And so they sat in the chair, and they were full of caca. And I can say that, but having been there at 13 years old and seeing it as an adult and seeing a lot of the missteps because they were so busy trying to be important that they forgot about service, the service of the community, that what it was. Here we are, it's like on paper, it sounds good to have the Apollo Theater and you got this and you got that. But if you don't have the right people running those entities, it doesn't help you. On one hand, it was great. This was a Black company that did a lot. But then the negative side was that they didn't allow the people that they hired who were highly qualified. I mean, when you think of all the people that came through the doors of WBLS and LIB, who really were at the top of their game, that were not allowed to really just thrive. The fact that you were able to go to San Francisco and be left alone, to me, is a miracle. God's hand was on you. No, and no, I mean it, because they didn't see San Francisco as a jewel, right? It wasn't. Yeah, they did. It wasn't a jewel, which was to your benefit. They didn't bother LA too much because Hal had his hand there and was like, "You're not coming in here," until the end. Until the end, when they made Hal go back to New York, and then Judge Sutton took over, which he was not qualified for radio. It's like you put these people in charge who are just not qualified. It's like, we love you. We're so grateful that you are this epic family, but you got to know your place in order to have the success. So that's my rant. I'll let you go ahead and have your say, because you had to deal with it head on.
Well, they wanted, after 86, they felt that they wanted a consistent number one. They wanted us to be number one every book. And we didn't have that kind of staff. We didn't have a strong staff. And here's what happened. We were filling out these $1 million budgets for programming and whatnot. And they were like superficial because the Apollo needed a lot of money. It needed restoration and everything else going on with that. So every time they needed a bundle of money, they would just take money out of programming automatically, because BLS is number one, and we don't need to put the money there. We need to put it over here. I needed a TV commercial to, KISS was in control of the local city bus boards. They were these small bus boards outside of bodegas all over town, all over the 5 boroughs. They had that covered. And all we had was T-shirts and bumper stickers. And T-shirts and bumper stickers don't, beat bus boards. They don't. It's not visible enough. So I asked for a TV commercial, gave them the specs on the TV commercial and whatnot, how it should look and how it should be. And I went to the meeting with the agency in Nashville. They liked the idea, but when it came down to it, the chairman changed that. Instead of getting a 30-second slick commercial for us, we got a 10-second Michelangelo, because I had chosen the slogan line in a class by itself. So the chairman said, Michelangelo, a picture of Michelangelo's, one of his great masterpieces. We took like 5 of his masterpieces, turned them into 10-second TV commercials. And what does Michelangelo have to do with a 18-year-old in Harlem or in the Bronx, or, because we're trying to get a little bit younger. And that was a mistake too, Lydia. We shouldn't have been trying to get younger. We had finally a focus group that showed my idea was true. Hal knew it, and David Lampell and Charles Warfield knew it. Where I suggested to them, we need to go classic now. We need to go back to the 70s and just stay there, because the 25, 54-year-old audience will follow us there. But the chairman didn't see it that way. He ordered these 10-second Michelangelo commercials and whatnot that were terrible. And it did nothing for our ratings. So we sat maybe at number 7. And I sat at 7, for a couple more books. So there wasn't any movement or anything. And they felt 7 was not, representative of where they wanted to be. However, in my time during the 80s, Radio and Records confirmed it. It's in my book. I had 8 number 1 books and trends. And we were second in the market behind HTZ. KISS, during that same time that I was the PD, had 4. So we outdid our direct competitor 2-1. And still, number 7 was too low for them. At least we were able to neutralize KISS, but you can't neutralize everybody. And that becomes the thing. Different factions of your programming have to be, effective on getting different kinds of audience. And we just didn't have it.
At the beginning, they had lightning in a bottle, and they didn't recognize what that was. When you're first in the market and you're the one that starts everything, you got to run harder, because people are coming behind you. They're coming to take your spot. And if you're not ahead of you got to think ahead. It's like, they're coming. I gotta see something else. Bringing back Frankie, he was not in the same mindset that he was. He was fresh the first time around, he was fresh. He was exciting. He was, he had the pulse of the city, so he could see ahead. But then when he got into the legal trouble regarding payola, and then he was gone from the city, and he was trying to make a name in Hollywood, and didn't, because he was out here for a period of time at KTU. He had a slot, a radio slot for a period of time, and it wasn't. People in LA don't care about you being a celebrity because they're all celebrities.
Celebrities, yeah.
You could be Frankie Hollywood Crocker in New York, and that was exciting, but you could not do that in Los Angeles because everybody's a star. Who are you? Who are you? You can come on as many horses as you want, but ain't nobody going to give you your due. And he was trying to figure out. I think at that point he was trying to figure out his life. So when he came back to New York, he didn't have it. He wasn't the visionary at that moment. He was just trying to deal with life. So you have this incredible station who everybody's coming after now. Everybody, you're the one to beat. We got to take you down. You're the one to beat. And if you're not consistently sharp and you keep fumbling, and you don't recover, that was the thing. They didn't allow you to help recover the station to go, okay, let's go in this. That was because that to me, that makes the most sense to go. Yeah. You know what? We can't compete with them. So let's break out of that pact and find our own groove.
Yeah, there was a lot of competition. Also, Lydia, from videos. Frankie got his shot as a VJ, but video TV was really a big competitor of FM radio. We had stereo, but stereo didn't mean anything anymore. Radio is a one-dimensional experience. It only is listening. When video came out, you had a star like Michael Jackson. Now you want to see him dance and hear his song. People were drawn to that. When they could have a preference between radio or video, they went with video. That just made common sense. A lot of programmers don't understand the fact that you can't protect 100% of your audience 100% of the time. And you've got to be on top where you've got the next thing ready to go. I was lucky enough in my mindset that some of the things that worked in California, I actually used in New York at BLS and whatnot. And it was because of that, I had things and ideas that I looked at it in California. And when I was looking for things in New York, I looked back at some old notes and things and say, hey, maybe it's time to try this. Let's try this. Let's try this. And some of those ideas actually came to fruition to help me out too. But we were in a period in the late 80s of so much turmoil and so much of the technical world changing things. We went from cassettes, which was a ridiculous idea for the music companies to be using as a format. We were being sent cassettes instead of singles or things like that, or albums. We weren't getting albums anymore. Then the transition was to CDs. There was a care situation with CDs. Some of the stuff that we played in the control room happened to be our 8-tracks or our carts, right? And we had vinyl too. It's too much technology to get control of, because if it's better to listen to music in the technology that it was designed for. In other words, Luther Vandross, Never Too Much on vinyl sounds better than it does digitalized for a CD. And a lot of music is true that way. One thing that I struggled with and I was able to change with Jerry Kupfer at BLS was we changed the technology that we used in the boxes that we use to improve the signal and improve the sound. R&B radio has always been very bassy, that thump and whatnot. People like funk. Even when we played funk, we didn't turn the boxes on for that or turn the boxes up for that. We just left it where it was, let people go ahead and make that change for themselves. But when you're trying to put together a product, which includes the music, the DJ, the commercials, and everything else that comes through the speakers, you got to feel that you're in total control of that, because it's all part of what comes through the speakers. And what comes through the speakers is ultimately what you're judged by. People, have you ever heard a song on the radio and said to yourself, boy, that sounds terrible? You heard it somewhere else and it sounded good, and you're hearing it now and it sounds terrible. But that's a common kind of occurrence inside of what happens at radio stations.
Let's talk about the technology, because you're really astute about that. As I'm recalling what you were saying at the beginning when you were at BLS, and you noticed that the sound, the technical sound, was not good, because this is a recurring thing that you have the gift to hear that. We have a lot of on-air personalities. They just come and they speak. They have the gift of gab, but they don't have that extra perception to hear the sound, to go, this is off. This is not, that they're just about them and how, but that is a gift you have, to be able to go, wait a minute, how do we improve this sound? So during that time, I'm curious to know, did you start digitalizing stuff? Because now you're working off of 3 formats almost. You have the vinyls, you got the cassettes, now you got the CDs. How do you transfer everything to one thing to have to make it uniform?
It's $1 million project, Lydia.
Okay.
So what I've got to avoid and utilize when I can inside of programming is not going from a CD to a piece of vinyl, not going from a CD to a piece of tape. If I go to vinyl, it's got to be remastered. So I've got to match quality as much as I can, because I want a quality sound. That's, the objective that I think works. Some radio stations wrestle with that. There were radio stations back then. KTU was maybe 80-90% carts when I was there in 1979. All right, mostly carts. So you had cart stations, you had vinyl stations, but you did have people stepping up to the next thing. And as I said, too, it was a horrible experiment for the record companies to use cassettes. We couldn't even queue them up in the control room to be able to use them. Some of the quality was Dolby, it was decent quality, but you can't queue it up. What good is it to you? So there's just a number of the trials and tribulations that I had to think my way through and find a solution for during that 6-7 year period.
So what was the end for you at BLS that said, okay, I'm done here?
The end was, a conversation with the president. I mean, I was blamed for that period of time where we were very scattered and there was just too much to do. I hadn't had a vacation, Lydia, in maybe 3 or 4 years. Missed some time of my kids' lives and things like that. And I was just burnt out, and I was tired of fighting every day. I said, God, I'm fighting here at work, and it's tough for me to go home and take that home with me. So when I got into an argument with Pierre one day over the ratings, he was disappointed and whatnot. And like I said, we had spent all of our money on the Apollo and the record label and all of these other side ventures and put no money inside of radio. And I knew what was coming. He was going to let me go. So what I talked to Harvey Stone, he must have gotten wind of me having some issues in New York. And he was the GM at KBLX in San Francisco. He says, BK, if you want to come back to San Francisco, you are welcome. He said, just let me know. I said, well, Harvey, I'm going to talk to my wife, think on it a little bit, and I'll get back to you. But I went into the meeting with Pepe, and so, Pepe let me know he's disappointed and they were going to make a change. And it didn't I didn't even shed a tear. I said, good. I just felt the relief of the world off of my shoulders. Here's something that's going to blow your mind. I got a call from Doug Herzog, and Doug's boss was Abby Konowich. If you know Abby Konowich, he was the president of MTV.
Okay.
And they were looking for a program director. So I walked out of that office that day. I didn't know about the interview. I was at home. Doug Herzog, who worked at MTV, was a neighbor of mine. He walks over, rings the bell. Come on in, let's have a glass of wine. So Doug had heard about me being let go. He says, man, I'll get you the interview. You can, come over and interview for the job because I think you'd be perfect for it. So I went to the interview for MTV. We couldn't work it out because they wanted the rights to, the corporate rights to your ideas and stuff like that. I mean, the plan, the planning sessions that you do, you think that you're doing for yourself. You're not. You're doing it for them. And, I had a good lawyer, and I knew that that's something I didn't want to do.
That's important for everybody to know, that when you work for corporate, whatever ideas you come up with, they own. Yep. It's not against you. It's just how they have set up the system. Unless you come in before and say, these are mine, I take them with me when I leave. But for the most part, they own everything you do. Yep. And I think as creatives, it's important to understand that corporate owns your stuff. So go ahead. I just wanted to throw that in.
So I knew that was going to be an issue and a problem. I'm saying I'm the first Black guy, and now they want everything I've got. They wouldn't have called me if they weren't impressed with what was going on at BLS is what I'm saying. And so we couldn't make the numbers work. And Harvey Stone called me back for the second time. And he said, you're out now. So I said, yeah, I'm out. So he says, I'll give you a raise if you come back to San Francisco. I was deemed not fired. I was deemed transferred from BLS back to San Francisco for more money. So I said,
praise the Lord.
This is a crazy world, a crazy world. I won't have to deal with Frankie or any of the madness or anything. And so that's what happened. I went back to San Francisco in 1989.
And so how long were you at BLX at that time?
I did it for 2 years. This is going to sound strange, but I said to my wife, let's go back to New York. I think that, I just need some time to chill and get myself together and decide what the next thing's going to be. My parents were really sick by this time. And I got to be there for my parents. She had to be there for her mother as well. So it was just time to go back home.
So Laurie's family was also in New York?
Yeah, she's a Harlem girl.
I did not know that. Okay, go ahead.
I appreciated everything that, Harvey had done for me and whatnot. And it gave me some space and time just to, realize who I was again and come back out of it. But my bottom line was, and I told Laurie this, I said, I'm tired of making these people money. I'm tired of making these people rich. Not that I'm not making money, but, they don't deserve it. And so I said, I'm tired of making money for these people. Let's just chill out for a minute. And that's what we did. Came back to Patterson and we chilled out for a year. And then Howard hired me. Howard University hired me to program WHUR. And then I just floated around DC for a while until satellite radio came.
Okay, so this is where it gets juicy. Satellite radio comes and you go to SiriusXM. Is that where you start?
Yeah. One of my friends got a job at satellite at XM. And he said, BK, he says, they're looking for people to do R&B. He said, are you interested? So I said, well, I don't know anything about it. So he gave me some of the articles. I read up on it. And I told Bruce I'd be interested. And he got me the interview with Lee Abrams, who was the chief programming officer for satellite. There were two companies, Sirius and XM.
Okay.
And XM was the best music platform. Sirius's platform was built around Howard Stern and talk. But we had 1 million more subscribers than they had at Sirius. The reason why the takeover happened was because Sirius was based in New York, and they were closer to Wall Street and Wall Street's influence, and that's what happened there. But the thing that saved me radio-wise was XM, because Lee Abrams allowed me to do what I did in San Francisco. Just be myself. I didn't have a boss.
You were the boss. Yes.
I have the responsibility for this channel, make it as good as I could. Actually, when we first started, we had 75 music channels, and my channel was the highest R&B channel. So that worked out very well for me. And when I walked in for the interview, I knew this was the place I wanted to retire from.
And you were there 20 years?
23.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, 23.
So you've left there, but now you're getting ready to, you haven't really retired, because now you're getting ready to do some other stuff musically.
Yeah. Well, let me say this to you. They have to be the right situations. Just too good to turn down. I'm not doing anything. I'm enjoying retirement, but I think I need something to do.
You know, there's no retirement in the Bible. Just saying.
Good.
Just so you know, that's a lie. There's no retirement in the Bible. Moses was working at 80. Caleb and Joshua got to come into the land of milk and honey at 80 years old. And my favorite thing is Caleb tells God, when they come into the land of milk and honey, I'm ready. Give me my land. I'm ready. I'm ready. You know, he didn't come in there tired, broke, busted, and disgusted. He was like, Lord, you said you're going to give it to me. I am ready. Let's go. So I just want you to know that there's no retirement, BK, none at all. Okay. So what I want to ask you, first of all, about your book. Give me a little bit about your book and what made you decide you wanted to write.
When I was in college, it was a mandate from my literature teacher. Freshman year, you have to establish and write a journal with entries every day. And the entries could be on anything and everything. And I did that. And once you get into the habit of doing it, it just became, kind of elementary, and I just continued to do it. So I have, I guess, entries going back 40 or 50 years. And a lot of my radio career is in there. Great memories. Now, here's what happened for me, Lydia. I was in college. I was in a theater program. I was accepted as in the music program to get a bachelor's in music because I could play saxophone, clarinet, and trumpet. So I knew music. I was a basketball scholarship is what got me to college. All right. I took a local 4-year scholarship for basketball. They could only get me into the university as a music major because I was too late to get in as liberal arts. I went to the audition for music, passed it, and got accepted because I had been involved in music 15 years at that point or whatnot, from the time I could walk. So I knew music and I could do that. However, music didn't meet the schedule that required me to be at basketball practice. So I had to give up, music. And not give it up, but just not major in music. So I was accepted my sophomore year, and I transferred to theater. And I became a thespian for 3 years at William Patterson University. And I did some college radio as well. So everything seemed to vibe together and come together and whatnot to be involved in this super medium of radio.
So in college, you discovered radio, and that's when you started to aspire to be on air.
Yeah, my older brother drove me through Manhattan one afternoon, sunny spring afternoon, and he pointed out Frankie Crocker. Frankie was walking his dog, and he said, "You see that guy over there?" And I told him, "I don't know who that is." So he said, "We were just listening to him because we were listening to RL in the car." And he said, "That's Frankie Crocker." So I said, "Oh, so that's Frankie Crocker." He was dressed suave and whatnot, looked Hollywood. So I asked my brother, "How much does he make? How much money does he make?" And he said, "I don't know, but he's making a lot of money." Now, my older brother was a dentist. So, I was around some older educated people in my life, and I was looking for what's going to be my thing. I can't be a doctor now. I'm failing out of college. But anyway, that's how it came about. And I started my junior and senior year looking for projects I could do that connected me to radio. So I started touring radio stations and doing my in-year term papers and stuff like that on local radio stations and stuff like that. So I gained a lot of real quick knowledge, and I built a DJ setup at my mother's house. She wasn't very happy about it. What is this? Two turntables in on a desk and things like that. And I was starting to make air checks. So, probably by the time I was a senior, I was really serious about getting a job in radio.
And your first job was in Pennsylvania, in Philly?
First job was in Columbus, Ohio, WVKO.
Okay.
I went from VKO to Detroit, my first entree into
Oh,
Detroit.
okay.
And then I went to Philadelphia.
Okay. Wow. So you were jumping. You were going from place to place. Commitment. I love it. So going back to your writing.
So my son worked with a rapper, Mac Miller. He committed suicide a couple of years ago,
Oh,
but he had that big hit called Best Day Ever. And my son did some of the production on it. And we have a big studio here in the basement. He asked me if he could play some beats for me one day, and I was blown away. They were technically perfect. I said, man. So he did this thing for Mac Miller. He wanted to get paid. Mac Miller got wind of it, and they changed my son's involvement in the project so he wouldn't get paid. So we got him a lawyer, and he sued, and he got paid. And the lecture started with, "Don't let anybody take credit for your work." That's what I told him. And then a couple of weeks later, I was looking at um, Facebook or social media and saw that Frankie was in a picture, Frankie Crocker, with the sideways W, which he had nothing to do with. That's world's best looking sound territory, and in a class by itself. And I said, no, those are things that I'm involved with. I hate it when I see that he's getting credit for work that I've done, things that I've done. And I just thought about how hypocritical this was. I just said that to my son. So I just started looking back at my journal, and I just started going to the high points and whatnot. And I said, wow, you know what? People have said to me for years, why don't you write a book? Because I've done a lot of things in the business. So that's what it turned into, Lydia. I've been off this year and a half, and spent some good time on this book. It's a book of thank you to all of the people who helped me along the way. My village, I had some phenomenal people around me who encouraged me to live my dream and to dream bigger, to be humble.
who were those people?
Well, of course, once they got comfortable, my parents were there. My brother, my youngest sister, who just passed away, she was a big supportive fan. But I had some great teachers along the way, too, who also took the time to encourage me. I wasn't supposed to be a radio DJ out of college. One of my professors actually offered me a full-time news reporter position in Miami to do TV. He said, you can do this. And I didn't take the job because I didn't know anybody in Miami. So I said, I'm not going to get started there. And this Professor Flannery. Actually, it started me in radio as well. He had spent time in radio and TV with me. He actually kind of felt I was too good for radio in terms of, you've got more talent than that. You've got some looks. So let's see why don't you take this shot, because it's a shot really to go big time. I didn't take that, but I took a lot of his advice. I had another teacher called Jackson Ford, who was my theatrical coach. I had a couple of nice big parts in college plays and whatnot. He encouraged me to, maybe think about doing some theater.
How did your training in theater affect you as an on-air personality?
Fearless. We used to do improvisation. Oh my God. So I had a teacher, Dr. Ford, was my teacher. He brought in a poem one day because I never participated in class. I just sat there and just be a good boy and you'll pass the class. That's that kind of. So he brought a poem to class called The Pussy. And he knew from my culture that would make me feel uncomfortable. So he read it eloquently in class. And then he walks over to me, taps me on the shoulder, and takes me into the front of the class. He says, "Now I want you to read this." And he said, he made me read it a couple of times and read it again. And he took away and stripped me from me trying to think of myself as, what the audience wanted. And he said, "Be yourself. Go ahead, be yourself. Read this." And he freed me of that, paralyzed kind of feel you have in front of the class, to think on your feet, to express yourself, and all of those things in an impromptu way. So when it came to turning on a microphone and finding something to say or being conversational, I had a couple of years of improv that, helped me quite a bit.
So when you came to BLS, it was easy for you to be yourself because you had all these years of practice to work on being yourself. I love it. I love it. I love it.
God set this up. So, things just started just to fit. It fits. This fits. And that's how I got there, Lydia. I had a lot of strong people behind me. I had the ability also to, after I graduated college, I became a school teacher for a couple of years while I was looking for a job at Patterson East Side. Do you ever see the movie called Lean on Me?
Yes.
That's where I went to high school, and that's where I returned as basketball coach and teacher.
Okay, let's talk about God, because I hear your faith just in your actions, not in what you said, but in what you did. Where did your relationship start with God? When did that start to sprout for you?
Well, I mean, in the Black community, you start in church young and early. My uncle was deacon of the church. That was my father's oldest brother. And my father sang in the choir. So on Sunday morning, the rule in my house from my mother is, if you don't go to church, you don't eat today. And the meal you don't want to miss in the house is
Sunday.
So they would give you 15 cents, maybe 25 cents to put in the
offering.
In the offering.
Yes.
And my brother and I, he was older than me, thank God. He was my mentor for everything. But we'd sneak by the candy store and get 5 cents worth of candy and put the 10 cents in the box. And there were the times we'd be caught, tickling each other in the front pew when my father's giving us the side eye. So yeah, you grow up in the church. But, in more recent years, as things have become more testing, the tests that you start to experience with age, when you're in your midlife, the tests are a lot simpler because you've got time. as you get a little bit older, you realize you don't have that time. You don't have the luxury of saying next year or 10 years or 20 years down the line. You realize that I know I didn't get here by myself, and I know that this path just fits together so well as a puzzle that so much more good has happened to me because I've had faith and because I've prayed and because those prayers have been answered. And it makes it a little bit easier to feel comfortable and move on and also share your story in your life because this life was given to me. And that's a strong relative term for me, not to take for granted the gifts along the way.
But you've also been a good steward of the gifts, that you've been good at making sure you are responsible and taking ownership of the gifts in a healthy way.
Mentor when I can. I've brought a number of people along in this business who've had 30 and 40-year careers. That makes me very happy. But to have people walk up to me and say, thank you for the things they feel I've done for them or helped them along the path, that's so powerful in terms of just who you are and what you've done. Because when it comes down to it in the end and you look back, it's nice to be able to see the things you've done come to people who deserve good things too.
I want to talk about your kids a little bit because you have at least two that I know that are in the business, Portia and your son, that have paved their own way in the music business or in entertainment.
Yeah.
So you have three children? Is it three? Pamela, Portia, and your son
Portia,
is your
Jeffrey.
son's Jeffrey. So
Black
growing
Diamond.
up. So growing up, how did you feed them creatively?
Not at all, Lydia. My mother and father let me be me. Um, I come from a successful family of educators, master's degrees, EEDs, doctor. My oldest brother is was a doctor turned dentist, which is an interesting story. And then there was me, the kid who was the underachiever academically. Um, they sent me outside to play so my brother could study, you know. But some of it did wear off on me at the point where I would finally got to high school and I wasn't doing well academically. My mother made my brother tutor me in everything for a year or so until I got on track to do some things, academically, because for my parents, that was next to being a doctor, being an educator was the next thing of relevance and importance to them. And you want to please them, you want to make them happy. My dad was a janitor. He was an excellent um, automobile mechanic, but he couldn't get a job as a mechanic because of Jim Crow. White garages wouldn't hire a black man. So he did the job as took the job as a janitor. I tell this story in the book. It was very important to me. When we messed up in school, or if I messed up in school, my dad would take us to work on Saturday, and he would, let us clean toilets and clean the floors where white employees would pee on the floor because they knew my father would have to clean it up. So I seen a lot of the worst in people and in the world, and he, you know, showed me that, and those lessons stuck. So for my kids, I just wanted to make sure that they were safe, they were happy, and that their minds were prepared for anything that they would want to do. And when I say that, I mean, I enjoy and have enjoyed watching them blossom into what they want to be and become. Now, Portia she stepped away from the entertainment business, but she came back this year. We're working on a Black documentary on Black radio. So that's going to be fun. And we're already doing that. My daughter, Pamela, she has just left CNN. She's the first Black female field producer for CNN in Atlanta. Um, and she's working for public radio in Georgia now. And my son is a music producer. So, they're happy and they're successful. And excuse me, I can't ask for more than that. I mean, the joy that I get just from watching them, I think of how my mother and father were, just laughing at me doing some things. So, they make mistakes, but I'm here in case they need help. I don't want to offer help or opinions that are exactly that. If you can do it on your own, do it on your own. If you need help, ask me.
We started the conversation talking about civil rights and how BLS took the mantle. And in hearing you talk about your parents, you were very cognizant of how important it was to excel.
Yes.
Because of the Jim Crow, because of the fact that people of color were denied basic rights, basic, we talk about equality. There was no equality at that point, and we're going back to that place where they're trying to take equality away from us again. How important it is for people of color to recognize that we got to fight. We got to fight to preserve what we worked so hard to get, that they've been trying to gut the Voting Act. They've already done away with affirmative action. And it's not, the misnomer that affirmative action gives people of color something special. It's like, you didn't work for it, but you're getting it. But the truth is
and
that's
did.
The only way
for it.
That's right. That's the only way you could get through the door, was to be part of affirmative action. We have a judge who came through affirmative action, and he's been one of the culprits taking it away from us. Justice Clarence Thomas. And for young people who may be listening, how important it is to fight for this. I mean, I, like you, I'm a little younger than you, but I, like you, was able to go to school because of affirmative action. And I wasn't the smartest tool in the shed. I wasn't but I worked really hard. It was, it's like, I think that our generation was very diligent in saying to us, don't mess this up. Don't mess this up. No matter what your learning disability is, you better, I was always taught that you better be the best that you can be. You better strive. So from an early age,
you have to be twice as good.
So from 4th grade on, I had tutors because I had dyslexia. So I thought I was dumb up until, oh my God, till my 20s. I thought there was something wrong with me. It was like, I can't get it. But that when you were talking about having a difficult time in academia, in high school and in college, it is not everybody's brain works that way. And you have to honor how your brain works. For you, it was creativity. What got you going was being able to get on radio, because that's creative. You weren't an executive in the traditional sense. You were performer. You just performed with your voice. So it is important that for the generation that is coming now to understand where it is that you thrive because of the civil rights, because of the fights that Black people fought for, we have a little bit more freedom to go, okay, I'm going this route because I'm good at this, instead of, back then there was no choice. Your father didn't have a choice. He had to clean the toilets. He had to do the grunt work. But today we do have certain choices, and we have to work hard to preserve them. Yep. So for you, having come through Jim Crow, then the Voting Act, and now where we are, what can you leave the audience with, giving hope, or giving concern, or giving basic common sense?
Yeah, that's a good word, common sense, because success in life is a lot of common sense. I think what made it easier for our culture, and I'd say that for me, was I was taught in the strictest terms the difference in right and wrong. And I was taught in the strictest terms, learn at home or you learn it in the streets. I was taught in the strictest terms, speak only when asked. Some of those parables actually, follow me through my life, and especially being an executive, because I learned to listen. And most people don't do that, don't have the patience to listen. You need to listen to people before you speak. Evaluate what's being told to you, and then how you can apply it, as opposed to, trying to be competitive and here's my idea. This is the way that I would do it. Winning those little spats and things like that really don't mean a lot to you. But I think that it really just came to my upbringing. My father and mother didn't have a gray area. You're right or you're wrong. There's no gray area at all. They never had that. And I had an entire life of that, hearing from them, because if you were right, you would hear about it. If you were wrong, you're really going to hear about it. So I think that today's culture has gone ahead and relaxed itself fashionably, thinking that being compatible with other people, you have to, be a little less judgmental. People are scared to be in that situation. But I think that for our generation, for me, coming up the way that I came up, um, if you were asked a question, you wanted to be right. My father always used to tell us, I'm not going to clean up something that's a lie. In other words, if I said, that guy beat me up over there, Dad, I want you to go get him, right? And and the opposite is true. Your parents wouldn't do that. Your word is bond. Even from a young age, that's a lot of responsibility, because at a point you're going to start acting that way. I had to start acting that way. So I can't be out here lying and stealing and cheating and all of that, because my parents aren't going to support that. And they're the people you got to look up to. So
the beauty is that you had great role models. The beauty is that they gave you the directions, the instruction manual to allow you. No, they did, to allow you to have a long career. Being in entertainment is hard, and a lot of people might have 15 minutes of fame, and then it's over. And to be able to sustain all these years and do well, and be a role model, and be an example, because you were going back to what you said about your improv class, that they taught you how to be you, how to just be you. And you've been able to bring that all the way through your career, good, bad, indifferent. You never wavered, that you were able to go, well, this is what I do, and that takes a lot of courage to be the one who's going against the stream. You're not, you're not going with the crowd. Your parents taught you, no, that's not how you do it. You got to do it this way. You got to always do it the right way. And so that is a testimony for you, and the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. So I am assuming that your children do the same, that they too come with good instructions. My last question to you is, what do you want your legacy to be?
I think my book is going to be that, in terms of the amount of advice and the examples of how to deal with certain situations and whatnot. A legacy is almost debilitating when I think about it. But the reason why I wrote the book is because I've lost so many people in my family and whatnot in recent years. And I want to thank them. And I want the world to know who they were, because they were some pretty good people in terms of I saw them fight through their battles and whatnot. And I saw them win a lot of them. I saw them lose too, but that was part of my lesson to learn. They didn't go out and shoot somebody or stab somebody because they had a bad day. They came home, they had dinner, found something to laugh at, mostly their kids, go to sleep and get up the next day. But I would like everybody to read this book who's interested in motivation, interested in lessons of humility, because I've learned how to be humility because circumstances call for humility, and use, certain virtues at the right time. I think that's something else that I've been lucky to be very good at applying, the right virtue at the right time. Recognize that there's some people around you who can help you. The thing that a lot of young people don't do and don't understand yet is also something else that I was brought up in my culture. Ask for help. A lot of people have, you have too much pride, you're scared, to ask for help. No. People can help you get there. And not everybody can do that. But don't be scared to ask for help. The worst thing that could happen to you is the word no. That's my mother's thing. Don't be scared to be turned away or turned down. It's only no. You still pick up and you go on from there and ask somebody else. Get some help. Get some help from somebody else. And all things are applicable. Take some good virtues. Get a dictionary, read some virtues and whatnot. See how they apply to you. What you can make stronger. What you can add to them. And whatnot. And there you'll see some of the things that you are that you're not even aware that you are. Say, I do that. Yeah, I help people along the way. I do this. I do that. And I think the book is a good example of a lot of that, because the example of, a lot of things going right after some things go wrong. Dream bigger. That's the most important thing for young people, because you've got time to dream. So whether you've had a couple of rough years or whatnot, didn't go to college, didn't go to school, didn't do whatever, go ahead and make that dream come true, because it's in the back of your mind. It's just that you're scared to do it. So once you get your high school education, then you can get a college education. Don't get stalled. Go ahead and dream bigger. Dream as big as you want. When I taught, I'm going to say this and end it for you. When I taught, one of my things teaching my kids who were basically kids from the ghetto and kids who are from low income don't dream because they're kind of forced to be satisfied with what they have, but somewhere in their mind, there's a dream. They want to be on TV or ride motorcycles or whatever. They're just scared of that dream because it's going to cost money, or I don't have, the things that are going to get me there. But you should dream as big as you want. This is one of my big dreams. It's not my biggest dream, but I'm pretty happy with the way things worked out. Dream bigger.
I'm just going to add to that. And that is where we live today. We have access that you and I didn't have when we were coming up. We have the internet. We have
Google.
Smartphones. Yes, we can Google well, not only Google, we got ChatGPT, we got Perplexity, AI, my new favorite friend. We have YouTube. We can watch every video on everything we want to learn, so that if we don't have mentors in our immediate circle, we can make mentors from YouTube videos. There are so many great people on YouTube that have great information that will help you, that will give you basic things that you may not get at home. You know, if you come from the ghetto, if you come from a low class background, if you don't get to go to high school or don't get to go to college, you can educate yourself through YouTube videos, through Audible books. There's so many different ways that are non-traditional now that we can get the information. And so what you said about asking, it's the courage to ask outside of your community, because sometimes your community can't help you because they don't know the answer, but to seek it out, go to the library, go down into places where there's learning happening. And it doesn't have to be in schools, but there's places where go to organization, nonprofits, where, you know, go into after school programs. There's so much for you to get. So thank you for sharing your time with us. And this was so wonderful to
Thank
hear
you for having me.
Your story. And I can't wait to read the book. So as soon as the book is off the press, I'm looking forward to reading it. So thank you so much. This was awesome. This was awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for your over 50 years of service in the music business and in radio, that you never wavered. Thank you. Because you are one of our heroes. You are a great example of what it is to have a family, do your job, and stay accountable to the community. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Lydia.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Acting Smarter Now. Let us know what you think and share it with friends. It helps us a lot. And stay tuned to the next episode.